How y'all doing? I'm making this video because I want to read a passage, which is an introduction to a book by a guy written by Frank Herbert. He was the author who created the Dune series, one of the famous science fiction epics of all time. It expands 6 books from the author until he passed away, leaving hangover. His son, over the last few years, have written all the prequels and the sequels on either side of those. I've never read any of those. I stuck to the original 6. I particularly like the 4th one. But the first one is definitely a classic to read if you haven't done it. And of course, with a big successful hit like that, it's he sold the movie rights, and then eventually, after a lot hit and miss, bear in mind Dune was written back in the '60s. It wasn't until the early '80s, 1983, that a movie adaptation came about. This one was produced by Dino De Laurentiis and directed by David Lynch. Now, I grew up watching this film as a kid before I ever got to read the books. And then over the course, and even though I understood, there's a pretty good adaptation, there's a lot of people on the internet that kind of, scoff at David Lynch's version of this. And it really is a classic story. They don't get the book right and all that. And of course, you always hear the counter argument, well, they never get it right from the original story. Now, personally, in this day and age, the more technology furthers up, the less that argument stands. But this was the early 80s, special effects can only go so far. Certain scenes in books cannot be fully adapted, but I think it was a good one. And guess what? The author agrees. How do I know? Because I bought this at a used bookstore. This is Frank Herbert's I. This is a series of short stories with only one thing related to Dune. The rest are just other stories that he did. But it's the introduction I want to read here. This one, it talks about his experiences, about going through the process of making a movie with David Lynch. So if you ever kind of wonder at least one person's opinion about an adaptation of his movie, here we go. All right, Frank Herbert's I. This is done by Berkeley Science Fiction, I guess it's Publishing Works, and very interesting cover. Also got some good interior artwork, but I won't get too much into that. All right. Please forgive me if I'm not a perfect reader, if I stutter a bit here and there. Alright, introduction. It was a happy time, an educational time, and I was utterly fascinated with making a film of my novel Dune. Early in the experience, I reverted to my background as an investigative reporter. What you read here is editorial comment, subjective, and reportage, as objective as I can make it. When Sterling Lanier bought Dune for children in 1963, we had no idea about a movie. It was enough that the novel would be published and I could make jokes about Chilton publisher of many how-to manuals saying they'll want to retitle it How to Repair Your Ornithopter. Dune fans will get that. My first visit to Churubusco Studios in Mexico City put a different stamp on what it means to adapt a novel to a screen. The snaking lines of electrical cables, the big yellow buses with Dune on the front, and mobs of people in and around the sound stages, and shops turning out props, costumes, and special effects, and pulsing sounds of machinery, and glaring lights. The shouted orders all said industry. Excuse me. It was poetic justice that we should be in Mexico, which had given me an inexpensive place to live when I began writing, and now Dune was providing well-paid employment for more than 1,000 Mexicans. I was glad to be back in Mexico and worried about it. A worry born out of the troubles that plagued shooting a film there, the necessity to bribe Mexican officials before you could work or ship your film, shoddy equipment, some of the worst air in the world, and something apparently no one considered when deciding on a location. In at least some of the major cities, Mexican police are the criminal syndicate and corruption goes very high in the government. The problems created by that corruption were no surprise, but the film industry itself, that was full of surprises. I've heard many warnings about Dino De Laurentiis, yet I found him honorable and trustworthy. He was a creative force and able to hold back and allow others room to work. Daughter, Rafaela, was a hard-headed businesswoman and an organizational powerhouse as concerned as a mother would be about those who depended on her. Director David Lynch and I hit it off because I understood film to be a language different from English. He spoke it, and I was a rank beginner. To make a film, you translate, as though from English to German. Each of the world's languages contains linguistic experiences unique to its own history. You can say things in one language you cannot say in another. I was continually brought up short by the processes of taking pages from Dune and shifting them to quick visual effects. Example: Dune recreates a feudal society. To impress that on you, the film decor echoes Renaissance and feudal Italy. A stroke of genius and visually exciting. Filming Dune did something else. I have David to thank for teaching me to write screenplays. During that education, I was able to influence some decisions about the film, but I was unable to influence the ending or how much would be cut for the theater. From the approximately 5 hours of film in the original footage, only about 2/5 emerged from the cutting room floor. Excuse me again. What was cut? Here's a partial list for the aficionados. The confrontation between Stilgar, Everett McGill, and Duke Leto, played by Jurgen Prochnow, where Stilgar spits on the table the gift of his water. The development of the relationship between Shut-Up Mapes, played by Linda Hunt, and Jessica, played by Francesca Annis. Most of the love story between Paul Moadi, played by Kyle MacLachlan, and Chaney, played by Sean Young. Let's see. You got a fight. There's a fight where Paul kills a Fremen and cries, giving water to the dead. The development of Kynes, which played by Max von Sydow as the Imperial Planetologist, and, most vital, the place of melange in the Spacefaring Society. The relationship between Paul and his mentors, Duncan Idaho, played by Richard Jordan, Thufir Hawat, played by Freddie Jones, Gurney Halleck, played by Patrick Stewart, and Dr. Yui, played by Dean Stockwell. The death of Thufir Hawat. The relationship between Paul and the Fremen widow, Hera, played by Molly Wynn. The scene with Jessica and the Reverend Mother Mohiam, played by Cyan Phillips, that would have made the Bene Gesserit sisterhood more understandable. That's only a partial list. Dino and Raffaello have talked about restoring the outtakes and making a miniseries, a la The Godfather. This may happen because Dino wanted a longer film all along. The film of Dune is a result of a paradox. Product of the industry that pretends to creativity and shies away from risk. Creation takes risks, that's the movie industry's dilemma. It's why so much control over creativity is in the hands of non-creative people. The reasoning behind their decision is enlightening. So many films are aimed primarily at early to late teens because this age group is more easily seduced by hype. These also are viewers with time and money and an inclination to join the date at the local Cineplex. Powerful forces in the entertainment business. Why a film of only about 2 hours? Because that length can be shown more frequently on a day-to-day basis, returning the investment quickly. Don't condemn this out of hand. If investors had not been found to put up $40 million, Dune would never have been filmed. And all the essentials in the book are on film, even though all of it did not get onto your screen. Never forget, it's an industry. There is more here than meets the eye. One of the most important things is corporate politics. Big corporations or bureaucracies that often promote people who are best at covering their asses. Such people run scared, fearful of any suggestion they can make themselves. They may surround themselves with others who run the same way. Don't take risk. Find out what succeeds and copy it. Some of the most successful practitioners plagiarize and steal without a qualm, knowing they can stall their victims for years with expensive legal maneuvers. Creativity often has little to do with movie making except when writing promotional copy. So what happened to the movie of Dune, the 6th biggest money earner in 1984? What happened to the film that at this writing is still number 2 at the box office in Germany, Japan, and France? I can only tell you what I saw. There was scrambling and many false starts around the film's release, a clear signal of nervousness to audiences, including critics. Critics who were inclined to be sympathetic were not permitted to see advanced screenings. The hype machine grinded into action, telling people to expect the complete Dune. My efforts were enlisted. I joined in wholeheartedly because I enjoyed the film, even as cut, and I told it as I saw it. What reached the screen is a visual feast that begins as Dune begins, and you hear my dialogue all through it. Overseas, there was none of these negative signals, and Dune set box office records. It was up 29% the third week in Great Britain. There was some 40,000 views each day in the first 3 days in Paris alone. And to quote French commentator Visually magnificent, rich enough for many repeat viewings. In Europe, you did not find critics bragging, as did one closest aristocrat on CBS. Oh, sorry. I don't like movies that make me think. He wants to feed you bread and circuses and keep you docile. Was it a success or a failure as a movie? I'm the wrong person to ask. Like me, Dune movie audiences, fans, and newcomers wanted more. They would have returned many times to see that more. What they saw was true to my book, even though most of it stayed on the cutting room floor. Dune fans could supply the missing scenes in imagination, but they still long for those scenes. Investors will get back their investment. There will not be large immediate profits, as they might have had. They risked a longer film and satisfied the expectations they raised. Catering to the lowest common denominator is the way you play the no-risk movie game. And David, with agreement from Dino and Raffaella, went against that directive. I had my quibbles about the film, of course. Paul was a man playing God, and not a God who could make it rain. Dune was aimed at the whole idea of the infallible leader, because my view of history says mistakes made by a leader, or made in leader's name, are amplified by the numbers who follow without question. That's how 900 people wound up in Guyana drinking poison Kool-Aid. That's how the U.S. said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Charismatic John Kennedy," and found itself embroiled in Vietnam. That's how Germany said "Sieg Heil" and murdered more than 6 million of its fellow human beings. Leadership, and our dependence on it, how and why we choose particular leaders, is a much misunderstood historical phenomenon. You see, we often get non-creative leaders, people most interested in preserving their own position. They flock around centers of power. Such centers attract people who can be corrupted. That is a more descriptive observation than say simply that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you are corruptible and your imagination is confined to worries about loss of power, you exist in a self-destructive system. Eventually, as all life goes, you must encounter something you did not anticipate. And if you're not straight in your creative processes, you have no new ways for adapting to change. Adapt or die, that's the first rule of survival. The limited version of non-creative people is not difficult to understand. Creativity frightens the unimaginative. They don't know what's happening. Things new and unexpected arise from creativity. This threatens things as they are, and terrible thought, and undermines illusions of omnipotence. Besides, at least in the movie industry, they know an audience can be enticed into the theater by the right promotion. It's all a matter of hype. You buy an audience. The next time you watch political campaign, ask yourself if that sounds familiar. There is more. David had trouble with the fact that Star Wars used up so much of Dune. We found 16 points of identity between my novel and Star Wars. That is not to say that there was other than coincidence, even though we figured the odds against coincidence and produced a number larger than the number of stars in the universe. The fact that David was able to translate the written words into screen language speaks of his visual genius. If you were disappointed or wanted more, chalk it up to that showbiz and prayed for the miniseries. So much of the wonderful world of film and corporate decision. I recommend you to read Ed Naha's The Making of Dune and Harlan Ellis's 2-part essay in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. Screen them through my comments. Don't get the idea that any of this that I am grateful. Making that film was a superb education. I don't take this as a swan song. I'm alive and well and intend to stay that way while I continue writing as long as possible. In my opinion, that David's film of Dune will also be alive and well long after people have forgotten the potboilers that come out of corporate boardrooms. This is based partly on the reaction of everyone who worked on film. They were sad to be parting when it was over and glad they have done it. The wrap party was a rare scene of happy nostalgia. Francesca Annis, who played Lady Jessica, labeled it hard work but great work. Dune is a film addressed to your audiovisual senses in a unique way, forcing you to participate and not just sit there while it is done for you. A miniseries restoring the outtakes would make this even more apparent. That's how I wrote the novel. Want you to participate with the best of your imagination. I did not aim for the lowest common denominator and write down to anyone. You and I have a compact, and my responsibility is to entertain you as richly as possible, always giving you as much extra as I can. I assume you are intelligent and will enlist your own imagination. You'll see that when you read the Dune excerpt and the other stories in this collection. Okay. Don't ask yourself if I succeed or if the film succeeded. The only valid critic is time. Does it endure? We can only guess and give our opinions. No one living today really knows, but people next century certainly will. Dune, the movie, took about $40 million to make. It did not do well overall. Grant, as he said, it did wonderful in Europe, but it was critically panned in the United States. A lot of critics thought of it was a jumbled mess. I grew up watching, even though I didn't understand all of it. It still appealed to me. Heck, I was a kid. I watched Star Wars, watched all the special effects. Hell, look what I was saying in Dune, watching all the giant sandworms. It was one of the best special effects I've seen in the early times that were practical. But despite all that, the $40 million, it only made about $30 million back. It's considered a bomb. It was a good run of a bomb. Right now, it's reached cult level status. And Dune is still popular ever. They did make the miniseries. I remember watching on television. They had a couple of nights, and my dad recorded it. It included a lot of deleted scenes, which again you could get in this copy right here. This has the original theatrical and the extended cut, but it's still not 5-hour piece. No, it's longer than the original 2 hours. But I still enjoyed it despite all the flaws, and I definitely recommend it to you if you want to see good old classic science fiction. I'll probably list a few links below. There's this one web channel of Dune Info on YouTube. I think it was done by one of the guys who used to work on it. It has a lot of stuff from the making of Dune, early attempts at making the Dune before David Lynch and Dino De Laurentiis. Some of them from the artwork of Mobius, the comic strip writer from France. But I'll just put the link down below and let you decide. And there's also one good piece, I'll put a link below, of Harlan Ellison, who did a wonderful summation of Dune. And again, I'll link that below. So, you find this fascinating? Again, I have yet to read the whole thing of this, of Frank Herbert's I, but the introduction alone was what got me to do this. I read this before, and I wish I had it. When he says I'll read the other stories, see what else he's done. But, okay, yeah, there you go. Frank Herbert's I, his introduction is well worth a read, but I'm sure many of the other stories by one of the masters of science fiction, go ahead and give it a shot. And if you can, you have time, want to read a good science fiction epic, read the original Dune series by Frank Herbert. I don't know if I should tell you not to, or to read the other prequels or the sequels of Dune, written by his son based on his father's outline and notes. Because, I don't know. Dune is very long. It takes place over a few thousand years to begin with, the original 6 books, before Frank Herbert died. I might go ahead and read the last sequels based on that, just for completion. I'm always kind of left in doubt that, well, imagine writing something of multiple books and then you happen to die and someone takes over. Would that version of the finishing it off, those last books, be exactly as you would have written as the original author? Maybe, most likely not. It's just just for completionists, for the fans. I think I'll leave it as leave it as a cliffhanger, as it originally was after Chapter House Dune, which is the 6th book and the final book before Frank Herbert passed away. And well, let me know what you think. Again, check out Frank Herbert's I. You all have a nice day. Thank you.